Hi, Marcia, sorry. Hi, yeah, hi, Marcia. Hi, loyal opposition. It's good to be here again tonight. Hopefully, we can have a good discussion.
Yes, yes, yes. Wonderful. Now, were you able to see those young men who are part of the track club, the Blaze Track Club? Did you get a chance to see them?
No, I have not. Today was usually Fridays are usually more relaxed, but this is tax season and was kind of busy, still busy doing stuff. So I didn't get a chance to catch up on things, Barb. I wasn't even listening to brass tacks today, which is something I normally do. I was just
Normally
so
do.
caught up doing stuff.
No, well, we
Mhm.
we just showed the Blaze Track Club, and you had quite a number of these young men from 12 years old up to I think probably about 16, 17 years old, and they're getting ready to travel to Canada to do athletics to run. And so we I went and interviewed them, and it was just a joy to see them. We've been talking all about all this death, and it's good to see young men. We had one young woman among them, and they were doing their thing out there, and sweating and working hard, and it was good. It was really good. I'll show a little bit more in the program, but welcome again, Adrian. And we've been talking about Barbados going from silence to sound, the Bajan awakening, and really we want them to wake up, wake up to the power they have in voting, their vote. So over to you, Mr. Hinds.
Yes, Marcia, thanks. This is, I mean, in this regard, with regards to Barbadians finding their voice again and agitating and keeping check, the ultimate check on governance, you have played a big part in that. I've always said that for the last couple of decades, if not longer, most of the agitating in Barbados was led by political aspirants, usually people in the opposition. And so Barbadians, I think, had gotten to the case, the point where um, they were looking for someone because that's what they've known to take charge, and then they would come along. And I thought it really important that there should be an independent voice, that as political parties come to governance and they go, that voice will stay there, keeping that check, because it is going to be a necessary thing. Governments get into power, and they will all obviously do things um, that are not in the interest of the public, and there must be a watchful eye out there to call it out and to hold them to account. And I think it seems difficult, it seems hard, but to get Barbadians back. But remember that they've been docile and been led to be docile and pushed and forced to be docile for a long time. So it's going to be a difficult awakening. We must be persistent and patient with Barbadians and bringing them back. And I usually like to use the term negotiate to bring them back. Yes, there's voter apathy out there. Um, yes, I think Barbadians have a legitimate reason to be apathetic about voting.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's legitimacy in many of the people who no longer vote in what they see and why they don't. And as I said, we need to construct a dialogue with these folks to understand and appreciate their position and give them an alternative
Mm-hmm.
um, to come back and
But
try to be part of the discourse, the political discourse.
yes, and we're having a little chat tonight. But let me
Mhm.
ask you, Mr. Hines, why are people apathetic towards voting? I myself, at some point, I had gotten fed up and said I'm not doing it again. Why? I know why I had said that, but why do you think, talking to people, why do you think people are apathetic?
Well, it's a common sense result. Like, if you vote for the DLP, uh, back in 1990, and they
Mm-hmm.
did things you didn't like, and then you said, okay, I'm going to vote them out and vote for the other party. And then they come in and they did stuff you didn't like, and then you vote for the DLP again. and then you vote for the BLP, and then after a while you're like, this back and forth ain't working out because, and you get to that point where you truly believe that there's no difference between the two political parties. So you're like, why am I going through this exercise
Mm-hmm.
when the results is likely to be the same? That's um, a legitimate response to what people have been experiencing, and you can't tell them that that's not what they've been experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
So so I think that is the reason why. You ask any person who no longer votes or no longer cares to be in politics. To them, politics is party politics, and as far as they're concerned, there's no difference,
There's no
right?
difference. So
Yeah.
let me ask the people who are watching. First of all, guys, we need to share. I'm asking you kindly to like and to share. Remember, we gave you that little lesson about the algorithm, right? So if they want to report, they will see that people are liking it. So it's AI. So you've got to make sure that you are sharing. All right. So folks, why do you think there's apathy? Why do you think, those of you who are on? I wanted to use the chat and to tell me, why do you think that there's a vote apathy? Somebody here said that they agree with you. um yeah, anybody, while yeah, so we'll continue. I'll continue, Adrian. But how do we, you've identified that as one of the reasons. I know for me, my reason was, because I tended to vote more in the third parties then, the smaller parties. And I got disappointed because I knew that they probably would not necessarily win that year, but I was one of those that was willing to grow with a third party. Okay. But what I got disappointed in is that each year that I would vote for them, when the that voting season, when the elections are over, then they close up shop, and I don't hear from them again until actually after, as soon as the election is called, then I hear from the third parties. And so I had made up my mind, listen, I don't want to see you all again. I don't want to vote anymore, and so on. But now, I'm beginning to realize that it's important.
Hmm.
It is a part of the arsenal that I have as an individual to be able
Hmm.
to vote. So
Yeah.
how do we break this apathy?
Well, it is all up to Barbadians and those of us who will go out there and encourage them to come back and vote and give them a reason why they should approach it differently. A lot of people vote party. I'll give you an example. There was a time in Minnesota, here in the States, where this wrestler named Jesse Ventura never ran in politics. He was so upset. He said he's going to run. And surprisingly, he won because the electorate were like, you know what, we can't do any worse,
Mhm.
and we had a Republican, we had a Democrat. They're not, so we're gonna put this guy in, and he didn't do too bad a job. But the electorate at that point weren't really interested in what he was going to do. They wanted to send a message to the two main parties that, hey,
Mm,
this is what can happen if you don't do right by us. And I think Barbadians need to get a little radical in that approach. Instead, I mean, we've reached a point where we've seen that, or in their opinion, that there's really no difference between the B's and the D's.
mhm,
So there are other people running. There are other people. You have a choice. But then you go back to, well, if them getting, they can't do anything either. Well, at some point, you have to send a message to the two main parties that, hey, look, it is possible for an independent to be
mhm,
elected to the House of Parliament, right? You've already gone through a case where you elect somebody from the D's or the B's, they get him for 5 years and they didn't do anything for you. So then to come back and say, well, I'm not going to vote because they're not doing anything for me, but I'm not going to vote for this independent because he's not going to be able to do anything. Well,
mhm,
the B's and the D's were in, they weren't doing anything for you. So if this independent get in and he can't do anything for you, at least you are sending a signal, right? You're initiating a signal of bringing a watershed moment to Barbados politics where, for the first time, an independent is being elected to the parliament. That should signal, if it doesn't continue, it should signal to the main parties that this is not business as usual. So
mhm,
there's benefit to voting for an independent, right? Yes, granted when he gets in, because of the centralization of power through parties in parliament, controlling the public purse, controlling the treasury, that clearly for that first guy, they're going to give him a hard time, or girl, they're going to give them a hard time to ensure they're going to make sure that the constituency that he or she represents is not going to get anything from the public purse, so as the that make it difficult for that person to be reelected or for their other independents to follow. So the first 5 years, if you go into this to send that signal to them, you got to be in it and understanding that for that 5 years, my constituency is likely not to get anything because the parties who are in charge of the public purse are going to send a message. I mean, we see this today where, like, for instance, the Barbados Labour Parties and but the Democrats do it too. The DLP, when they're in power and there are opposition members of parliament, the opposition members of parliament always cry out and say their constituency doesn't get anything. They don't get any roads. They don't get all that stuff, right? So you would expect that when you put an independent in, right? So I'm saying to Barbadians, that 60%, don't walk away yet. Come back. You have not tried this approach of allowing people other than candidates for the two main parties to get into parliament to see what that can do. And I also want to talk about there is a movement in Barbados, a set of people who believe that not voting is a good thing, and that it sends sub-signal to the international community that democracy is under threat in Barbados. And I speak to this because I heard it a couple of times, and there are people who actually believe that there are entities out there outside of Barbados who will be so aggrieved if only 10% of voters go and vote that they would then attempt to do something about it. That's a nonsense idea. I keep telling people there's nobody outside of Barbados really interested in our democracy. That is our business. And if they don't believe me, they can look at Cuba, right? Cuba's right off America. America doesn't like Cuba, but they're not doing anything about the fact that Cuba is a communist state. And
Correct.
they're not doing anything about it. So how comes they're going to come and do something about Barbados being a one-party state? Remember, Singapore is also pretty much a one-party state because the people go to the polls and vote for that party religiously every time since 1965. So yes, voter apathy, I understand, it's legitimate. It is how we think, especially when we do so through our emotions. If you keep doing something expecting change and it doesn't occur, then you could be considered crazy. I
Right.
understand that. I understand that,
So
but go ahead.
my thing, let's talk about the numbers. So I hear
Mm.
you talk about 60%, so are we saying here that last election only 40% of the electorate voted?
Yeah, that is what I have not done the research on this. This is what I've heard bandied about out there that this the last election, the 2022 election, only 40% of eligible voters went to the polls. And there's been pushback on that, to suggest that, well, yeah, it was only because it was COVID. And then there are others that says that 60% of eligible voters, that list is made up of people who haven't voted in years, right? So they're saying it is pretty much less than that. That of that 60% that didn't vote consists of people who might have died, people who have gone away, people who should not be on the list, pretty much that they're saying. So it's not really 60%. But regardless, I think it is still arguable that the majority of Barbadians of eligible voting age do not vote, and for a large reason is that they don't care about the system.
Yeah.
And then there are others who believe.
I'd be curious to know what were the percentages, the years before, even the 2018. I know there was COVID and there were quite a few thousands of people who did not get a chance to vote because they had the virus
Well,
and were, but the election before, do you know what the percentage makeup was? If anybody knows, can put it in the chat.
yeah, I don't have the exact numbers. I know that the election in 2018, even though it was significantly higher than 22, was still lower than previous elections.
Ah.
Right. It was still lower than previous elections. And 22 being as some people define it, an anomaly, given the fact that it was 3 years into a term during COVID. That people says it was an anomaly and dismissed the second 30 left on that count. But that's another point too. I mean, it doesn't matter in our system how many people go to the polls. Doesn't matter. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it first past the post. 5 people go to the polls and 4 vote for the BLP and 1 vote for the DLP. The BLP wins and gets all the power just for 4 people, and they govern all 280,000 people as if they had a mandate. They're going to govern the same way, right?
Yeah.
So that's part of the. I always go back to this thing. The system sucks, but we can still work within it to bring
Mm-hmm.
change to it instead of
To it.
walking
Yeah.
away from it,
Yeah.
right? Because
You alluded to the next question I was going to ask. The de facto that element, the de facto one party state. Do you think that the absence of a strong opposition is discouraging voter participation? Like, we saw the first 30 love and people like got just discouraged. They see another 30 love. We're hearing the election that is in the air. Do you think people are going to because of this one party state that we've lived in, de facto one party state, that people are discouraged from voting?
it is likely to cause the numbers of people who no longer vote or people who walk away from the system to grow, right? Because again, that large number of people who no longer vote did so before there was ever a 30 love election result. They were walking away because, in their opinion, they didn't see a difference between the two parties. So now we have 230 loves and a likelihood that the same political party, they may not get all 30 seats, but they will certainly win the next government. That's the projections out there. That even more people will say, you see, I'm definitely done. And and these people are very loud, very confident in
Mm-hmm.
their moving away from the system, and they're going to repeat it. And oftentimes when you repeat something, it becomes truth, and people who don't necessarily follow politics or care to be that informed about it will take that vociferous projection of politics being a waste of time in Barbados and you should stay away from it. More people are going to take on that. Know that you have 230 loves by a government that
Mm-hmm.
are not doing things at the micro level,
Mm-hmm.
microeconomic level that are
Mm-hmm.
touching people. A lot of people are going to walk in and say it's a done deal. It is what it is. We can't. Barbadians, we love to say you can't. We
Yeah.
can't. It's a big word. A big word. And we just look at things and we say it can't happen. And
Mm-hmm.
that's more likely than not what will happen as a result of this 30 love. That's the yeah. I could see in spite of the next election, no COVID and stuff like that, that the results, the total number of people going to the polls might marginally increase, but the total number of people staying away will increase. I can see that happening.
Wow, you think that people are going to stay away, but and as you were saying, for some people staying away, staying home, they see it as a protest, while some
Yeah,
people say that you're surrendering. So
yeah.
so those of you who are listening, let me ask those who are listening, people who stay home from the polls, who don't go to the polls, staying home, is it a protest to you or a surrender? Are you protesting the whole system? Or are you surrendering to what is happening? Let me wait for them to answer that. But what
Yeah.
about our young people, the Gen Zs and the millennials? What are they saying? What do you think they're saying? A lot of them, to me, seems not interested at all.
Yeah, that's a phenomenon around the globe in most democracies. Young people are, when it comes to politics, when it comes to elections, are not, the statistics prove it, they're not dependable in that term of going to the polls. They'll come out and be part of, the marches and the celebrations against, you know, um, you know, giving it to the man and fighting against the power. But when it comes for them to go to the polls, they just don't show up. It's hard to pull
Mm,
them away from their electronic devices just to go put that X down. And plus, not necessarily in Barbados. I don't think voting has gotten that complicated in Barbados like it is up here. A ballot up here could be 3-4 pages long, you know, 8 by 11, filled with all words and a couple boxes, and you got to read stuff. And it's very difficult. And a lot of people look at it and say, meh, I'm not dealing with that. That's too much to vote. But we love to complain.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes I listen to people complain. I sit there and I listen. And oftentimes I get the impression that they're not really looking for any input from me. I'm just a sounding board. They just want to talk. They just want to say what they say in front of a person, and usually they don't really care if you respond. So I get the impression that they're fine just complaining, but not doing anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, it'd be interesting. As you're talking about people complaining and so on, you'll hear the millennials. They'll talk about stuff.
mhm,
They talk about what's happening, one on one. But you're not sure if they really are willing to do something about it. The question is really, is how could we actually engage them to the point where they leave their houses? This is the millennials, because it's quite a number of them, to leave their homes and go to the voting station and to actually vote.
yeah,
That is the thing. What do they do in the US to get the millennials to go out? Do you know?
nothing. I haven't seen anything materialize that is bringing those demographics to the poll in large numbers. There's been a lot of talk, but I haven't seen anything that really that seems geared towards them to bring them out to the polls. I think in some uh, constituencies there are they're spending money
Mm-hmm.
to entice them, but I don't know that it brings these people to the polls. I think the last set of information that I looked at with regards to how young people vote suggests that, yeah, unfortunately, they're not reliable in terms of actually going and placing their acts.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers don't demonstrate that at all. So, is it that there is more work to be done to get these people? I'm sure in America, I find my experience has been one where when there is a real need to get something done, people put their heads to it and find ways to do it. I'm sure that it can be done. There are things that those demographics do that they love, that we can look at those things and see how they can be brought into the whole election process, the whole political process, to encourage more of them to come to the polls. But I haven't seen any of that happening. But I'm sure somebody at some point, seeing this demographic for the richness that it is in terms of being able to carry an election, might engage, consultants to marry the interests and the likes of that demographics to get them to the polls. So
Yeah.
that's likely to happen at some point, not necessarily across the entire country in one fell swoop, but more likely than not at the state level, you'll find that. I'm sure it's probably going to happen in the New England region before it happens elsewhere.
Yeah. Somebody here, Nina, is saying, I think in the US, that voting is seen as a civic duty, promoted. It's promoted in the universities. I remember when I was a student in the US, that was something that was being pushed. That not that I could vote, I was a student, but I would hear it, and that it's not for, they don't push it for a particular party, but that you need to make your voice heard. And so voting, they came on the campus and they were recruiting, etc. But I don't know how much of that is done in our university here and in our schools and in the secondary schools and so on, because we're not teaching civics anymore. So there's
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, in America, yeah, civics is a big part of how they start kids up. I came here as an adult, and to get into the what was the first place I went that I got oh, I came here with on a green card, and when I got naturalized, it's part of the training you go through, because they'll ask you questions about, how is the U.S. government set up, what's a senator, who the senators are from your state, all that good stuff. So you get there's emphasis placed on people understanding the democracy at a very low level, civics. I don't think
Mm,
that happens. I don't think that happens in Barbados. It should, It's clear it doesn't happen in Barbados because a Barbadian would rather talk about the United States government system than to talk about the Barbadian system.
You are so
Because
right.
yeah, and because it's easy. The Americans made it easy to understand their system. Their system is as complicated as ours as Barbados, but they make it so easy, and that people find it interesting and we're willing to learn it and understand it. So yeah, yeah, for me to get into that, to become naturalized, I had to learn it. To get into the U.S. Army, which I was, I had to learn it. Um, yeah, I took a couple courses initially to at a community college, and one of them was about politics, and because I that's what I do wherever I go, and that was also part of it as well. So yeah, it's everywhere, but it's at the state level. It's not federal at all because there
Hmm.
are some states where they're pushing back on anything that's considered progressive, anything that's considered liberal, anything that's considered too educational, like states like Alabama and Mississippi. They don't teach civics down there. I can tell you that they don't. Um, but
Yeah.
in the Northeast, yeah. So it's at the state level. It's not a federal thing. It's at the state level where they do
Yeah.
most of that.
But
Mhm.
what about the whole idea of fear and victimization? I know you don't live in Barbados at the moment, but the reality is a lot of people, when they will quickly tell me, I don't want to be involved in politics. If you mention the word vote, it's like sin. Even in the church world, where I
Yeah.
come from, and you talk about voting. If you can look at the numbers now, if I had put up Neil Rowe and Wilfred Abrams' picture on here, I would have over 1,000 people on here. But we're talking about something that they have to do. So people they're not that engaged because there's this thing that they don't want to get too involved because
Right.
there's a fear the fear of victimization, right? And so
Hmm.
the question is, are people afraid to speak out or be seen supporting the wrong side? Is that why do you think that might contribute to some of the voter apathy?
Oh, absolutely. It's all intertwined. I don't know which what starts, if it's linear, right? But it could very well be that a large portion of those who have walked away and who are confident in saying, I don't do party politics. Well, for them, politics is all about party. That it might have had its genesis in the fact that they fear reprisal, that they fear victimization, and that's why they've walked away from it. That's a big part of it. Which came first? I don't know. There are some people who have been in politics and they've walked away from it because they become disillusioned because, as they say, there's no difference. And then there are others who are like, you know what? I've seen people get victimized. I'm not going on that path. I'm staying away from it. So, and that's where I'm trying to divorce politics that I'm talking about from party politics. There's a big
Mm-hmm.
difference, right? But at the same time, it's going to be hard to get people away from this idea that they will suffer some level of victimization if they speak up, right? I
Mm-hmm.
have that fear sometimes. Not I won't really call it fear, but concern, especially in Barbados. As a matter of fact, my mother had that fear that if I continue to speak and continue to like politics the way I did, that something's going to happen to me. And she was so happy when I got the opportunity to come to America, because she's like, at least I don't have to deal with the possibility of somebody trying to burn my house down or something like that. That's what she believed. A lot of people believe
Wow.
that victimization is real, and it very well might be. It might not be in your face. It might not be so obvious. It might be at a micro level, like how they do racism in America today. It's more aggression than outright racism, especially in the Northeast, where it's hard to tell if a person is doing what they're doing as a result of your skin color, but
Mm-hmm.
they're doing something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's somewhat like that in Barbados. I mean, there's some overtly obvious situations where the person, because of their sentiments towards the governing party or their association with the opposition parties, that this particular thing happened, but nobody's going to come out to say it. And it's very difficult to prove that that was the case. So yeah, a lot of people are like, you know what, I'm not going to go through all of that and run that risk. So therefore, I'm going to stay away from politics, which meaning party politics. But this ability to hold your government to account is necessary. And I would add to this, right, that when you live in a society like Barbados today, where there's so many people that have this fear of speaking up, There's so many people that have walked away from the system.
mhm,
It is when you have leadership that is more authoritarian than not.
mhm,
Incidentally, that word authoritarian is being used more and more with regards to defining Trump, to the point where there are people in America now who are talking about forming an opposition because the Democrats are not doing what they're supposed to do. And I smile when I hear that. I'm like, hey, somebody in Barbados might be telling them that, hey, that's what we're doing here now, where we have the loyal opposition, you know,
mhm.
outside of the official opposition party, holding government's feet to the fire,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So yeah, victimization is real. It has to be. If a person believes that that's the case, then it's
Mm,
real to them, and
yeah.
and we need to address that, not dismiss it and expect that person to come back to the poll. We have to have intimate conversations with Barbadians. I keep saying this all the time. Any political aspirant outside of the governing party that has an interest in the courting that 60% of people first must ask those people, what do they see or what do they want from a representative, and try to marry those aspirations, those wants, with their message as to what they can bring. You have to do this. You're dealing with adults, and they're set in their beliefs, and we need to negotiate to bring them back rather than telling people they're idiots or stupid for not voting. The fact is they're not, and there's a reason why. And if we try to understand that, we can probably bring a message that would bring them back
So, yeah.
to the polls, to the booth, because really that's the only way we can turn this around legitimately,
Mhm.
um, for the
So,
benefit
so
of the
you're
country.
you're basically saying we could march all we want. We could come on the show and we can bring all the speakers that we want. We can write our MPs. We could do all these different things. But the one thing for sure that we have that is we can use as a weapon is our vote.
Absolutely, marching is important. I would not couch it in those terms that you can march all you want, which is kind of dismissive that marching doesn't do anything. It does. It can do something, right?
Yes,
Because when you are telling through your numbers and through the messaging of your
that's
march,
true.
you're
That's
telling
true.
the government what you want. The government is under no misapprehension as to what you want, and they might change, or they may do what most people who operate in a dictatorial fashion and ignore you. But at least, as God said, go out in the highways and byways and compel men unto me, right?
Hmm.
Because the idea is that when judgment comes, you cannot say you didn't know, right?
Hmm.
The choice is yours. The choice is yours to come or not to come. But you cannot say that you did not know. And that's why we have to get out there and talk to people. It's hard
Hmm.
work. You're going to hear a lot of no's. You're going to hear a lot of dismissive. You're going to hear people, smirking, snirking, and laughing at you. But you got to go. You got to go out there and get them. Because, I mean, Michael Jordan said, the reason why he's successful is because he fails so many times. And and
Hmm.
and 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 those guys who did sales and did very well tell you that they hear more no's than they hear than they got yes, right? But they were willing to hear 2 million no's to get 300 yes, right? And it's that type of thing that we need to do if we're going to bring people back. We're not going to get all 60% back, right? But if you try to put your shoes on and wear them out, meeting all 8,000 people in your constituency, every one of them, right? And listen to them intently and give them your message, you're likely to have a higher probability of turning out a good vote for yourself and your party than if you didn't. You know,
Hmm. So you're
casual,
you're you're saying what a candidate could do. So if
yeah,
you're a candidate and you're running, go and meet the people, talk to them.
yes.
But if you're not a candidate, what can we do? People who are not candidates who are listening.
Well, what we are doing here electronically, right? We can do it. Actually, we because people of Barbados has become so polarized that it would help, right? It would help to have individuals who are not aligned with any political party. This is
Hmm.
about getting people back to the polls, right?
Hmm.
This is about getting people back to the polls. If this government, which I believe personally, should not be rewarded with a third term because of all the chaos that's going on in the country that they seem
Mm-hmm.
unable to deal with, right? That's just my view, right? But if I go out in my constituency and I talk to everybody in my constituency as an independent Barbadian, just telling people to come back to the polls and vote for whomever you want, it's your choice, not mine, right? And they do that, right? And this government wins 7,000 of the 8,000 people in that constituency. I have no problem
Mm-hmm.
because the voice of the people is the voice of God. And if 8,000, 7,000 of 8,000 people say, you know what, I still want this government, then I can't argue with
You
that.
can't do
I
anything about
can't,
it.
exactly. It's the same thing Pontius Pilate did when he, from the way it was taught to me, he washed his hand of, persecuting Jesus, of putting him on the cross, right? He asked the
Mm-hmm.
people, and the people said to give them Barabbas, right? And he went with what the people said, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would do the same thing. If a higher majority of eligible voters in Barbados says this government is the government that I want for a third term,
Mm-hmm.
I would not have anything to say because the voice of the people is the voice of God.
They
But
would have chosen.
exactly, but it is a legitimate argument today, given the results of the 2022 election, that is
Mm-hmm.
work for us to do, right? To bring democracy back to Barbados. To even and I'm sure I would insist if I were to do this, if all of us were to go out in Barbados and get as many people to come back to the polls and vote for whom they want, and the Barbados Labour Party won again, right? I will ask the Barbados Labour Party, right, to give me some praise for getting them a mandate more than what they currently have, right? They can go out there if they won, as a result of our efforts. They should thank us, right? That
Mm-hmm.
that they now have a legitimate government of the people and by the people, because currently they don't.
Mm-hmm.
They're governing only because we have a first past the post system.
Mm-hmm.
They're not representing the majority of the people based um on the vote. They're not doing that. They
But
just won. Right. Go ahead.
yeah, I see a question here, and we're waiting on our other guests. Who they're pretty late, but we'll continue talking. I think it's important. It's not
Hmm.
a hip hip hooray kind of a topic, but it's a very important topic.
Yeah.
And this person, Sonny, is saying, when did the party you voted in ever improve your life? We just ping pong from one to the other, and none of us ever win.
Very,
What? Go ahead.
very accurate. You can't argue against that. How can you argue against that? It's true.
Mm-hmm.
It is true, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had the individual instances where a party, not a party, but an individual candidate did something that would be advantageous to you, that would cause you to go vote for him. But on a large scale, these folks, the system sucks. When they get elected, they come to you, they beat the pavement, during the silly season. They get elected and then you don't see them anymore. And then they use this excuse that, their ministerial duties take them away from the constituency. So local needs are always on the back burner in Barbados. That's the status of representation in Barbados. It's non-existent. So
Mm-hmm.
Sonny is absolutely correct. So how dare we now, if Sonny walks away and says, I'm done with that, how dare anybody says to Sonny, you're an idiot for not voting. You're this and you're that. He has a legitimate reason for that. If that had happened to me, and if that was my view, it would be very hard for anybody to be condescending towards me and expect me to come back to the polls to vote again. For what purpose? You know. So this is what I'm saying. We need to message to Sonny a different way, right? And hopefully he will give the process another chance, right? If he goes at it,
Why should Sunny? It's a he. She.
it's a
Why
she. I'm
why?
sorry.
But why should Sunny give the process another chance?
Well,
Why?
because there are things. It's like you have not, in my opinion, I don't think all of the avenues to bring the results that you're looking, the representation to yourself that you're looking for, has been exhausted. I don't think so, right?
Mhm.
We don't vote for independence, right? We've never done that. That's an opportunity. We've never approached the process of understanding the constraints of a two-party system right? And how you can best affect change by cycling them, right? Deliberately going to the
Mm,
polls and voting on one issue. And if they don't achieve that issue in 5 years, in spite of all the better things that they've done, vote them out and bring the other people in. And
mm-hmm.
they give them one opportunity to do this one thing. And if they don't do it, vote them out and cycle them through and cycle them through. That's another opportunity as well. It's not, as I said, none of this can be achieved tomorrow. This is a
Mm-hmm.
long-term strategy. There's no short-term strategy to using the system to get
Mm-hmm.
the change that we want, right?
Mm-hmm.
The short-term strategy is a strategy that I tell people they need not to discuss. This thing about, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I keep telling people that the Americans are not going to sit and allow another small island like Grenada to do what Grenada did. So forget
Mm-hmm.
about that. Forget about that and work with what you have. We have not exhausted all the possibilities. Will it get the results that we want? I don't know. I'm not a soothsayer. I don't. I'm not a prophet that I can see into the future. But I think I am the type of person that will exhaust all the effort necessary to change a situation wrong. And if it doesn't work, I can say I have done all that I can. I must
Mm-hmm.
accept what is.
Right.
This is a concept that most people who have cancer and stuff like that, you hear the
Mm-hmm.
concept that they fight to the end. They have a
Mm-hmm.
terminal disease and they're still fighting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Consciously, they are saying to themselves, I must do what I need to do, right,
Yeah.
to turn this around. And if it doesn't, if it's not turned around, I can rest peacefully and said, I've done all that I
All
can.
that you could do.
And
Yeah.
this is what I'm saying to Barbadians. There's more that we could try to bring these people to heal, right? That we have not done, and that we've walked away before attempting to do, you
Yeah,
know.
so good. I mean, I think you're speaking a lot of sense there, Adrian, and I see Africa Bridge TV. I know who put that there. Said that we got free education because, like Sonny was saying, you vote in people and you get nothing. To say that, I would have to say, as much as I had been disillusioned, but when you look at it, there are things that you voted for that you've received, so we
Hmm.
got the free education. There's healthcare. Healthcare is terrible. You have to wait long. You have school meals and whatever. All of it is not, it's not perfect, but there are some things there. And what we have to understand, there's some people that they just don't like politics. They don't like voting. They don't like anything. But the thing is, though, Adrian, if you don't vote, how are you going to get governing and governance? How is that going to
Yeah.
even happen?
So you have to like address that. You're dealing with demographics that don't know anything about free education. You're telling someone, the millennials or the Gen Zs who grew up, going to school for free, and you want them to be acknowledging that this is a great thing. Well, it's something that it's like me. I grew up, my family didn't have a car, right? So when I got a ride in the car, it was a great thing. My
Mm-hmm,
kids, right, from the time they knew themselves, they were driving around in a car. So big deal, right?
mm-hmm,
It's a different generation that it will not make any sense for you to go to this generation today and say, come back to the polls, we gave you free education, and be like, huh? What? You mean to tell me it wasn't always free? They weren't
mm-hmm,
around in the 60s. They came to being in the 90s when
mm-hmm,
education was free, right? So you have to give these people an incentive today, right? Not something that occurred in the past. You have to give them an incentive today to come back to the thing. So when Sonny was talking about being disillusioned, they're talking about things that are not happening today.
mm-hmm,
It's like everything else. You can't create a product 10 years ago and keep that product the same labeling, the same marketing. Nobody's going to buy it. That's why you find they refresh the marketing of it. They refresh, new marketing on it to make it more appealing. That's how we are as human beings. Something new today becomes old tomorrow. And then
mm-hmm.
for you to come back and tell them, hey, look, well, I brought this thing 5 years ago. Why aren't you? It was like, that's all. What do you got for me? It's like, what have you done for me lately, kind of thing.
Lately, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's how
But I mean,
human
we're
beings.
going to continue to speak on this because I think I think that you can't throw, my general thought on this is that you really cannot throw out the baby and the bathwater.
Right.
That
No.
regardless of what we think of Barbados, that if we do not have leaders governing, that we probably would be off at the deep end
You think it's
already.
bad? You think it's bad? No, it would be worse. Yeah.
It will
I
be
always tell
worse.
people
So
that.
you need
Mhm.
leaders. You need
It,
leaders, and the system by which you have leaders is by voting, and so that is a system that we have, and ultimately that is you could pray. You could pray. Prayer is good. Marching is good. All of that is good, but you've got to go out and vote.
right. Yeah.
Basically, yeah,
Yeah.
is
So
what it
the,
is.
the human condition is one where we are social animals. We are better when we are together, but being together can lead to people rising above the group and then trying to use the resources of the group to benefit themselves and not the group, right?
Hmm.
And that's where governance comes in. We can't get along. We need each other, but we can't. Human beings, we cannot get along, and that's
Hmm.
where it is important to have government that
Hmm.
becomes the arbiter between us, right? The arbiter between us as we socialize in a civilized manner. When we run afoul of the agreements, then we can go to court rather than use a cutlass or a gun, right? That's where
Yes.
governance comes in. So government is very important for the social order of the society. Sometimes it goes too far where that claim of social order becomes a suppression through speech or whatever, but it is necessary. So what the rule is, because government is made up of human beings, and
Hmm.
government exists because human beings can't get along. So it is likely that government then can become an entity unto itself at the expense of the people it's supposed to be protecting, right?
Hmm.
And that's why in a democracy, there's always a role for people to play, to be the
Yes.
ultimate check and balance on government,
Yeah.
because the two parties, in outside of the last 230 loves, when when a parliament is formed, it's made up of the two parties, right? And
Hmm.
so they're the government. They are the government, and
Hmm.
you are the people. So you have the ultimate check, right? Yeah, we have a leader of the opposition, but you are the ultimate check. And if we were practicing that for a while, then when we had this 30 love and we form a parliament without a leader of the opposition, which they shouldn't have done, it would have been easy for us to step into this role. We would have been
Yes.
miles ahead and hold them to account as we are today.
Yes. Well, I mean, interesting discussion, and we are going to pick this up again some other time. It's
Yeah,
not easy. It's a difficult one, but we have to do it. Okay. Well,
yeah,
thank you so much, Adrian. You're going to miss the march tomorrow. You're there in
yeah.
Boston. You can't join this march
That's right.
tomorrow. Say no to the Vibes Cartel show. We march for life, not lyrics of violence. We march so the count doesn't rise. So that's what's happening tomorrow. You see the people expressing themselves, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah. So to the lady that said that I should come back home and run, and no, I have a more important job. My job is that of active voter citizen, and you can be those of us who have walked away. You can have that role as well. It's free. Active voter citizen. It's more
yeah,
important than being a politician.
yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you so very much. And we'll pick up on that. Okay. All right.
Okay.
God
At some
bless.
one last thing. At some point, I want to come back and talk about some other night or something. To talk about this soundbite that the government and its supporters are using. This thing about the lost decade. I want to
Yes,
discuss that for
yes,
once
we,
and for
we
all
can.
at
We
some
can.
point. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, we
But
can.
anyway,
Thank you.
have a good night.
Yes, thank you, Adrian. Thank you so much. God bless.
You're welcome.
Yes. Bye bye.